Thank you for joining us on Eco Advance. Can you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what you do?
Thank you, Phyllis, for having me. So my name is Benjamin Camilleri. I'm an environmental scientist based in Malta, and one of my main projects is the restoration of Chadwick's Lakes, which is a valley system. It's the second largest water catchment in Malta, and 2 kilometers of this valley system was targeted for restoration between 2015 and 2020.
So, why did they target that, especially since, as I understood it, many times the valley systems are considered more drainage ditches than freshwater restoration streams?
Yes, unfortunately in Malta, most of our valleys have been highly modified to store the rainwater that we get. We are a very dry region, so this was one of the main areas, one of the main methods used to capture and store rainwater. So the valleys have been highly modified, yes, and Chadwick Lakes is an example of this, for example. As I said, it's the second largest water catchment, so it's always had a very important aspect to the locals, and several dams have been built throughout the years by different people.
What about taking water from the lakes for agriculture? Is that an issue?
So the project itself increased the water capacity storage by 70 million cubic liters. This happened mainly by desilting the dams, which over time, grade 3, the Arundodonic started to grow behind the dams, sediment starts to capture in its base, and it always keeps on going up. So essentially, the dams were not acting as dams. So they desilted these dams and increased the water storage capacity by 70 million cubic liters of water. The farmers in the area do use the water. However, there isn't a strict policy or regulatory framework whereby water can be abstracted from the valley. So maybe while on the one hand, agriculture has gotten a boost in this regard, at the same time, if before we had the silt and water was still running over the valley quickly without it going perching into the aquifers. And now we're capturing it behind the dams, but abstracting it too fast for the habitats or for the ground to take any of it might still be an issue for the long-term restoration of the site, which will in turn and then affect, obviously, the farmers themselves. If the area dries out, it's only a limited period of time when they have water. So I think it needs to be more holistic in that regard.
So, what kinds of things are you thinking in terms of the project, both from the past and the future?
With regards to water capture, you mean, and management?
Hmm.
Well, obviously, we need to consider that we are a dry region. So, and we do not have a lot of water in our aquifers. It is brackish, most of it, and some of it is also polluted by nitrates. So there is an issue. Most of our surfaces are sealed, and we direct our rainwater to the sea. So on some front, we need to see how we're gonna capture and store water, even for food security and for water security. Obviously, we would need to see, but in the long-term perspective, we would need to quantify the amount of precipitation that we are having. We would need to understand the patterns when this rain is coming and optimize our storage techniques. That's only the first part. The second part, and then is to optimize resource use. And resource use isn't just the farmers taking water. Resource use is also the amount of water that should be retained in the valley for the habitats themselves, for the flora, for the fauna, and for also the public to go to the valley and see water in their valley. It is also their right. So there needs to be a holistic system whereby we quantify what agriculture needs and what should remain in the valley. And we also need to push for efficient agriculture because it doesn't make sense to have water intensive crops, for example, next to this area just because there's an abundance of water.
So, how do you see freshwater restoration for the future in that kind of environment?
Well, I think again we would need to first optimize our water consumption and our water patterns to reduce the stress on the system in general. That would be the first step, being more water conscious. The secondly is we need to restore the areas where you would find water, which is our valleys at the moment, and we need to also redirect water from the urban areas into the valleys. And then the next step would be to make sure our valleys are in good conditions, whereby the water is of good quality and it is optimized in the sense of its management. So, as I said before, there needs to be a holistic vision for how water can be used, keeping in mind that we cannot rely solely on desalination plants, but we also need to start recharging our aquifers. So that should be the main priority over the long term, I believe.
And so, how do you feel like the Chadwick Lakes restoration has helped people understand that? Do you feel like you're making progress?
I think it depends on which lobby you are talking about and then if you're making progress or not. I feel like most people now, today, here, understand the fluctuations in climate, and we are seeing it firsthand. So I don't think that is so deniable, sort of, by the general public. They do understand this. I think, but as I said, we don't look at the long-term perspective of water as a resource and of water management and of valley restoration, which is the habitat whereby we create water. If we go in and remove all the trees from the valleys because we think that's going to store more water. In reality, we are destroying the places that should store and create water in itself. The trees there, the microclimate, the humidity that is generated in the valley, all these things create water. So at the moment, that is how the flora survives. It survives of the night, the mist that is generated during the night, which at Chadwick Lake sometimes is still present until 1, 2 o'clock in the afternoon, not in summer. But that is in reality most of the water that our ecosystems are thriving on. So I think we need to start looking more holistically at water as a resource and the efficient use of water for all the industries, including our own survival, which is recharge of the aquifer, as I said.
That's fascinating about the banks. What have you done at Chadwick Lakes that you would advise others to do, as you say, to increase the mist and increase the recharge?
Mist, specifically, we're an island, so we can optimize that, I believe, even more. Some innovative measures could be what is adopted, for example, in Lima, Peru. Obviously, they have higher elevations than here, but we still have high mist, so mist collection systems. This can be even simply in the form of billboards close to valley systems, which are collecting water, redirecting it to valleys. This could be misting systems that the farmers themselves can adopt in valley systems to sustain their own water need through the water that they collect during the night, for example. Again, this goes hand in hand with water as a resource and optimizing sort of the systems that are already in place, and we can optimize on these systems rather than have a lot of infrastructure, maybe with regards to grey water filtration or with regards to desalination, that and then we will use to supply ourselves essentially and to sustain ourselves.
How do you get the local people involved in making that switch from the technological positives of desalination and other recycling water to also including some of your ideas on being more careful and managing your water more effectively?
Mm. I think in reality, the farmers themselves, for example, are quite aware because if you speak to most of them on the ground, they will tell you up front that if you water with desalinated water, if you water with grey water, if you water with spring water or rainwater, you'll see the difference in the plant growth and in the plant health. So I think most of the stakeholders already know this. It's just maybe they don't know what technologies they can apply or don't have the means to apply more sustainable solutions, if you want. The fact that there isn't, and then I believe an overarching holistic national framework just makes it more difficult for this concept to be understood, to be spoken about, and to be implemented on the ground.
What about the Water Framework Directive? Has that helped your work and helped make more visible the need for restoration?
I think yes, to some extent, and I think the initial project was also considering that. Again, they wanted to, apart from invest in the area for tourism purposes, it was also to store more water in the upper watershed for agriculture. But I think we need to, again, we have an idea, we're sort of implementing it. Now we just need to fine tune it to optimize it.
The idea in terms of,
The idea in terms of, first of all, storing water as a resource, how we should use water, and the management of water within watersheds, for example. So the idea is there, but maybe in practice it isn't applied in the best way it can.
you've been very active in trying to get families and kids to come to Chadwick Lakes and to come to some of the environmental sites around Malta. How do you think that that will impact over time?
Well, my hope is that the younger generation especially learns about all the diversity that we have. Unfortunately, urban sprawl in such a limited space has, I don't want to sound negative, but sort of destroyed most of our natural areas. So there are a few pockets which are maybe not also so accessible to people. So people just don't know. People think Malta is a desert. So I want to show them that Malta is not a desert. We are desertifying it, yes, but in its natural state, it is not a desert. And I want them to know the potential that they can have, because at the moment, for example, if you go in most of our valleys, it's either bare or it's several grasses or invasives. Not a lot of people have the notion of walking in a valley under a canopy of trees in Malta, which isn't difficult. It's just the intrusion and the disturbances going on in these areas is so large that we don't give chance for the area to recover. And if you have all the watershed, all the hydrological system that is influenced in the same way, it can't really recover either because the influences it's getting from upstream and downstream are the same. So it's seeds of invasive species, it's disturbances from anthropogenic activities, etc., etc. So my aim is for them to understand the richness, the potential that we have in regeneration and the potential of the island and where we were and where we're taking the island, which I believe is also in their interest that we work against desertifying our country.
Thank you so much. This has been excellent. Really appreciate your help.
Thank you, Phyllis.